All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Inside in Tennis podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Michals. As always, this podcast available on the Belief Network and wherever you get your shows, Apple, Spotify, any audio platform the podcasts are loaded, as well as the YouTube channel at Mitch Michals for the video episodes. We are firmly into the clay season. Exciting event to recap Monte Carlo, but we're gearing up for Barcelona. A lot of events this week. Joining me now, man who just called the action in Barcelona, called the action in Monte Carlo, veteran broadcaster, friend of the show, and now second time on it. So Nick Lester, welcome back to the Inside in Tennis podcast.
Mitch, thanks for having me. Absolute pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a while. I also forgot to put in the intro there, you're the guy that our mutual friend Robbie Koenig says is the man to answer the Wimbledon All-England Club question. So if I have a question, I got to go to you, apparently.
Yeah, I'll have a word about that.
We're not gonna share state secrets there, but that's just what he said. But no,
well, good. The privilege to be a member. So I'm very fortunate.
In all seriousness, though, the last couple of weeks have been kind of busy for you. I feel like all broadcasters and yourself, like you'd say you love it, but yeah, you were in Marrakech before that, right to Monte Carlo, now the grind into the Barcelona season. So it really, the clay season, I should say, just doesn't stop. It really ramps up for the next couple months.
Yeah, long stretch. Good stories as well. I think I love the stories of the lower ranked players as much as I do as a Sinner Alcaraz final, and the story of Trungelliti in Marrakech was incredible. I mean, you've got a guy there, 20 years a pro, never broken the top 100, qualifies, makes the final. Just remarkable, right? I really admire those guys, that have been on that journey for so long. Marrakech was a great week, actually, a really good week. Yeah. Obviously, last week was very special, and then into Barcelona this week. So there's a whole lot of different subplots, as there always are in these weeks.
Yeah, with Trungelliti, and I guess it's a question I can ask you because that run was, as you said, was life-changing. The veteran that gets into the top 100, gets into his first final, setting, records in a lot of areas. But when you're calling a match or calling a tournament rather like that, are you noticing that something's a little different with how he's playing, maybe how he's acting when a player goes on a run like that? Do you see anything from your vantage point that this could be special along the way?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, obviously, you've got to remember that a lot of my work is done on the ATP tour. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've seen Trungelliti play a ton of matches because I'd be lying if I did. So I think for me, just digging into the story is what makes it so fascinating. The 1,000+ matches that he's played. Also, I think what's underestimated is the financial side of it. A guy ranked 150 to 300 for as long as he's been in that ranking. That's a huge outgoings he's got. For him to keep himself going. So I think that's what makes his story so fascinating. And then at the age of 36 to break the top 100, and not break the top 100, to go from 120 to 76. He didn't just break the top 100. He's gone up to 70 in the world. So remarkable. He's got a lot of runway ahead of him in terms of the majors, playing the majors for the first time. And I just think it's just a great reward for persistence, for the journey and the amount of hours he's had to invest, the amount of tournaments he's played all across the world. He'd been in Rwanda for 2 weeks prior to Marrakech. So, yeah, I'm not a fairy tale, but I think something along those lines of someone that I think you can support, and you can say, you know what,
for sure,
this guy's put the miles in. He's dedicated his life to this sport, and now finally at the back end of his career, he's getting a reward for it.
Yeah, getting those opportunities. Hopefully, he can take advantage of them. It's really cool to see when players level up, whatever that level is. So we'll get to the tennis that we've got so far. Monte Carlo started the road to Roland Garros, and I was thinking about this too. It's the longest run up to a major. So what better way to start it than Monte Carlo, right? Just a perfect setting, a serene setting in Monaco, but also, as I've been lamenting about too, Nick, it's a 1 week major, or 1 week master. So you're getting right back into the thick of things. You don't have too many of them left, but Sunday, Monday, the event's great. The scenes are great. It's the perfect start place for this road to Roland Garros.
I just feel, Mitch, that the intensity of the 1 week masters are a little different. I feel like, I do feel honestly, and I don't think I'm alone in this, that the 12-day ones they stagger towards the end sometimes. And I think that's what we didn't have in Monte Carlo, the intensity of the matches on the main court and then the secondary show court. Wherever you look, you feel as though there's a good quality matchup going on, and I think it's that intensity that sometimes I think the 12-day events miss. Monte Carlo is so unique. It's an absolute bucket list for anyone that hasn't been there. It's a pretty small site. It's completely different from the others. There's not a lot of space around there. You're pretty squeezed when you come out of the main stands, and not a lot of room to move around. But I think for the first time ever this year, they sold out 8 straight days with the weekend as well, the weekend prior. So they definitely made some adjustments there. It just has a very special place on the calendar. It's got a lot of history, as we know. There's a lot of history there. A lot of great matches have been played over the years, and it has a setting like no other. Indian Wells obviously is pretty unique, but I think that just the way the facility they have there, the fact it's played at an actual club, a members club, which kind of sets it apart from so many of the other Masters events, I think definitely adds to its uniqueness. And it's just a fantastic event.
Do you think the top players, let's say like the top, 4 or 5 seeds, whatever the arbitrary cutoff is, do you think they prefer in a way these 1-week events? I know there's varying degrees of thought and there's no consensus on it, but the fact that they know, all right, it's not a major, we're leading up into a major, but you're going to have to hit the ground running. You can't really ease into this tournament. Do you think in a way they prefer that, or they might maybe like the time of the longer draws?
I think if we're honest, and the players were honest, the vast majority prefer the 1-week Masters. That's just my feeling. There'll be the odd one that maybe says they like the extra day off, which is a possibility. But I just think as a fan, it's just honestly, I think as a fan, it's just a better experience. It's condensed. It's condensed. That's just my view. And I've obviously been fortunate to cover this sport for 16, 17 years, having seen it in a whole lot of different formats. The previous format prior to extending it, I thought would work well. And I do think we're in danger of losing players. I think would not be a surprise if Jannik Sinner didn't play Madrid at all. And I was thinking about this, on the way back tonight. If Alcaraz wins Barcelona and wins Madrid, is he going to play Rome? Does he need to play Rome? I don't know. I don't know. These are, where if that was a 1-week event, would there be a slight consideration? As it is, it's got to be 2 weeks in Rome, 2 weeks in Madrid, and Canada obviously suffered a lot last year. If Sinner and Alcaraz make the final of Wimbledon again, are they both going to play in Canada again this year? That event may suffer. So that's the issue. I think that's the issue for me. And I think the majority of players probably, yes, there's been increases in prize money. Yes, the value of the event, of course, goes up. But I think from a fan perspective, it didn't need to be changed.
Yeah, to be fair, the scheduling issue of players playing all the lead-ups has been a thing even before the tournament's expanded, but I do think it's made it worse in a way because it's, compounding the fact that the schedule can be brutal and you're spending more time. So a lot of interesting decisions to be made, but we got to appreciate any opportunity we get for high-quality matches. I'm with you. These 1-week events are just great because they start exceptionally well. And the tennis world got what it wanted in the final of Monte Carlo. They got Sinner Alcaraz for the first time in 2026. Hard to believe given all the success they've already had. It was Jannik Sinner winning Monte Carlo, reclaiming the #1 ranking in straight sets, 7-6, 6-3. He beats Carlos Alcaraz, becomes just the second man after Novak Djokovic to win Miami and then Monte Carlo in back-to-back weeks. So phenomenal stuff, Nick, from Sinner, starting with him. The fact that he was able to go from Miami to Monte Carlo, new surface, not a lot of prep, no problem for Jannik, and yet he does what he does in big matches recently, handles business and drops 1 set the entire tournament. Just an exceptional run for the Italian.
Yeah, and won it in a different fashion as well, didn't he? I think in Miami, the serve underpinned everything he did well. He was serving great those 2 weeks in Miami. Didn't serve particularly well in Monte Carlo. I think he had to win his points in a different way. Obviously, on clay, you have to work a little bit harder, especially in Monte Carlo, where it's heavy and slow. It was quite overcast last week, so that definitely slowed conditions down. But from the back, he was exceptional. He found his serve at time in key moments, particularly in the second set against Zverev. Those numbers increased a lot. But there were a lot of challenges for him last week, and I think he said that in the post-match interview. You could sense a slight outpouring of relief in terms of getting it done and getting the victory. And you could see how much it meant to him as well, just to get that victory over Alcaraz at the start of the clay court season. Alcaraz perhaps a little off. I thought maybe people were a little harsh in the final because the conditions were so tough. It was very windy. It was blustery. It was heavy. Yeah, and I think I saw a lot of bit on social media saying it wasn't a great match. I think he needs to contextualize it a little bit in terms of how tough those conditions were. That was not easy to play tennis in at times,
Mhm.
and I think the guys actually produced a very good level considering that it wasn't their best match of all time, but they've set the bar pretty high in that regard, haven't they? And I think that's in many ways they're a victim of their own sort of
Yeah.
circumstance in that regard, in that they played perhaps a couple of the greatest matches of all time. So when it is just 10% not quite as good, then people are asking questions.
Yeah.
But I thought the level was good. I thought tactically, a couple of there was definitely a few changes in there. I think Sinner restricted Alcaraz's forehand a lot. You look at the numbers, the percentages of the forehand from Alcaraz going into the final. He was restricted a lot. He was pinned in that backhand corner a lot more. We saw Sinner jumping around the backhand and in the forehand a lot more as well. That was a big shift from both ends of the court. So yeah, I thought it was a decent quality match, and you could just
Yeah.
sense that you could sense how much it meant to Sinner to win that match and just get that early victory at the start of the clay.
Right. He mentioned that he was so glad beforehand that he got the chance to play him before Roland Garros. So that was
Um,
important. And I don't want to begrudge, like the number one ranking means a lot. It's a select list, but I agree. And I actually think the reaction wasn't like, not that number one's irrelevant, but it was more important, right, Nick, for him to beat Alcaraz than it was to regain number one. Like that was the reaction, was I got one over Carlos, because the rivalry has said Carlos has gotten the better of him, especially in the big matches. So he needed one for the rivalry and for his confidence to beat Carlos in the final.
Absolutely, he was 4-1 down on clay, wasn't he, prior to the victory? So excellent win. Totally agree. Number one was just a nice little, I think, a nice little footnote for him to secure that again. But it wasn't about that. It was about getting the better of Alcaraz, ahead of the French. They hadn't played obviously since Turin last year, so there had been that little bit of a gap. And I just think from a confidence perspective, let's not forget that Sinner hadn't won a Masters 1000 on clay until Sunday. So that was
Mhm.
another box tick for him right there.
Yeah.
I think that was, even to me, that was a little surprising. Sometimes we get a lot drowned in statistics, but it bypassed me that he actually hadn't won a Masters on clay
Oh,
until this week. So that was another nice, little
yeah.
box tick for him, going into an important part of the season. And I think just that little lift that we know he was 1 point away from winning Roland Garros.
Yeah.
So the game looked great.
Yeah.
He's such a natural mover on clay, Sinner, isn't he? It's not a transition like it is for some players. He moves so well on a clay court. Even from day one against Humbert, he was
Mhm.
sliding so seamlessly. And I think his movement on clay is exceptional.
Do you think on the Carlos side of things, it was just not his peak day at the office? Obviously, he played well. I mean, the match itself, there were so many momentum changes. It wasn't just how the scoreline went. He was up a break in the second. Sinner rattled off the last 5 games of the match. Do you think he just wasn't at his peak level? Did you see him struggling, Nick, with some of those tactics that you brought up that Sinner was doing? And were the conditions part of it as well? What was maybe holding Alcaraz back from getting the victory in this one?
Yeah, I don't think conditions helped. I definitely think, as I say, he was restricted from using his forehand quite as much as we're used to seeing from him. I think Alcaraz, when you look at the two players, the Sinner off both wings is able to generate pace and change direction. Alcaraz has got an exceptional forehand. His backhand is very good, don't get me wrong, but it's not
Yeah.
quite in Sinner's league, I don't think, offensively. Yes, he can use the drop shot and he can vary the pace a bit more maybe than Sinner can, but I think he was restricted in terms of his court position a little bit. Um, and you also got to remember that Sinner had a lot of chances to break as well. His break point conversion, I can't remember the exact number, but it might have been like 2 or 3 from 13. So Sinner had a lot of chances to break. Eventually, was able to do so. There's obviously we don't know exactly what's going on in the mind of these players, but I do wonder as well, with Alcaraz having completed the set of majors in January, whether he's just having a little bit of a reset in terms of the goals.
Mhm.
That was the whole year was
Yeah.
going to be based around winning Australia. The number one goal for him was winning Australia. He achieved that in January. He then came in Doha, played lights out tennis in Doha, and I just wonder possibly whether he's just a little bit down in intensity, maybe a fraction, just not quite feeling
Yeah.
the challenges ahead, and maybe a major will get those juices flying again at Roland Garros. We'll see. We'll see how this week goes. Obviously, he's a pretty overwhelming favourite to win in Barcelona, and Madrid. So the game obviously needs to be there again. But let's be honest, there's two guys that are still streaks ahead of everyone else right now.
Playing Barcelona just less than 48 hours after Monte Carlo. We'll see what Carlos has in the tank. I agree with you. Like the goals have changed. He's already at the youngest stage ever to win the calendar slam, or win the career slam, and then also have these goals of just catching and chasing down the majors. But I think the rivalry brings out the best in everyone. I love that this rivalry is transcendent in the way, Nick, that there are adjustments, right? After a winner claims it, then the other guy goes back to the drawing board, changes some stuff up as Sinner has done with the serve since the U.S. Open, especially. So it highlights that last thing you said, right? They're miles ahead, like we saw it in the semis and the rounds leading up, that these two are on another plane. And dare I say, Nick, it doesn't seem like the gap's getting closer anytime soon.
No, and I think a few people are wondering where that next challenge is going to come from. Fonseca had a good week last week, obviously. But they're stretching each other. Alcaraz and Sinner, undoubtedly. And it'll be interesting to see now if Alcaraz responds over the next month or so to see how they come into Roland Garros, because it certainly looks as though they're going to come into Roland Garros a long way ahead of the rest. Certainly like Arthur Thies, I think he could be someone who has the physicality to live with these guys. It'll be fascinating to see how he goes over the next month on clay, a surface that he's played well on. I don't rule out him if he can stay healthy. I think he could make some impact and certainly could hurt those two guys. Whether he can do it over 5 sets at a major, I don't know. But with the French crowd at home, I do like his chances of actually making some sort of impact piece if he has a good run on the clay, because he's looked very sharp since he came back, very sharp indeed. And I think he's got a lot of weapons that can hurt those guys. So he would be one contender. Obviously, Jack's struggling with injury still, as we know.
Yeah.
But as you say, at the moment, there's not too many guys out there that are holding their hand up and trying to sort of find a way to close the gap.
Well, let me ask you this to put a bow on Sinner Alcaraz. If I had to ask you how many more times in clay season, about up to 3, we'll say is max, will Sinner and Alcaraz face each other?
It's a good question. I don't think Sinner will play Madrid, personally. I think it is a perfect time to build in a break. Does Alcaraz play Rome? Probably. Do you know what? I'm going to go 1. I think they play Roland Garros final. I think they play Roland Garros final. Again, I think a lot of it comes down to these long Masters events. And if Alcaraz can play well in both the Spanish events, which is, let's be honest, is very likely, it wouldn't be surprising me if he lost a little early in Rome. So I think French Open final, I'm going to go 1.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. It's like we build it up that it's a lock, and yeah, there's circumstances, and scheduling is a big circumstance. So we'll see what happens in the future there. We got more with Nick Lester here on the Inside in Tennis podcast, talking clay season off the heels of Monte Carlo, and just putting a finality, a bow on what we saw at Monte Carlo. Other players and news and notes. You mentioned Joao Fonseca. I do think he's been showing a lot of promise, and I think the results that he's had has been a step on his journey. Now, obviously, people want to thrust him into the top 2, and he's not there yet, clearly. But what we've seen and what you've seen, Nick, right, like in the last couple months, pushing Sinner, Alcaraz kind of tuned him up, but he was not completely outclassed. And then going through Monte Carlo and taking a set off Zverev, he's starting to gain a little bit. He's starting to improve step by step in his process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for large portions, or certainly for portions of the match against Zverev, he looked to be the better player. Yes, I know he was in trouble, but I think there were times when maybe just the concentration lapsed. There was a little bit of ill discipline, inexperience, whatever you want to call it. He just didn't quite maintain his level. Fonseca, and a couple of games were costly in that regard. I remember a couple of times he broke and then got broken back immediately. And I just think maybe in a year's time, 2 years' time, that won't happen. I think he'll keep his foot on the accelerator. You've got to remember he was playing Monte Carlo for the first time, so this is a brand new experience as well, a new event, and we have to take those factors into consideration. He's still a teenager. There's a lot of developing to do. I think physically, yes, he looks strong. Does he move as well as some of those does he move as well as the top 2, top 3, top 4? No, he doesn't at the moment. Doesn't defend as well. Out of the corners, he's not quite as strong still, even though on clay, obviously, that's been a surface he's grown up on. So let's get that physical development, I'm sure, from his point of view, in place. Be interesting to see what schedule he plays over the next sort of 6 to 9 months if he builds in some breaks. But yeah, very promising. And I would imagine, and I would expect him to finish somewhere in the top 20. I would have thought maybe higher by the end of the year.
He's 35 right now, had the injury early, so I think the trajectory is up, and I think that's a good ranking goal for him. And yeah, you mentioned out of the corners. That was Jannik Sinner's like greatest gain, is what he was able to do there. So still plenty of time for him. But another player that I wanted your opinion on, Nick, and it's a tough question, but we've seen it a bunch now, and we have to ask it. Do you feel like Zverev is getting further away? Is the gap going the other direction? Given what we've seen, another loss to Sinner, I think 8 in a row now, and on clay, it just didn't look like a contest. So is he kind of loosening his grip on the rope, unfortunately?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I give a lot of props to Zverev because he has definitely looked in the mirror, undoubtedly, over the last 6 months. I think that's been pretty clear. He's been very candid about that situation with regards to the changes he's trying to make in his game, whether it's too late now to implement those changes and whether too much damage has been done. Slightly concerning that against Sinner, when he's down 3-love, 4-love, he's looking across to the side of the court, and in Russian, he's saying to his dad, "I don't know how to play this guy." That would be a little worrying. He wouldn't be alone in that regard, let's be honest. But for the number 3 player in the world to say that about the then number 2 player in the world,
I know.
that's a little concerning. And that's a lot of baggage that he's going to have to try and overcome. Because let's be honest, tactically, what could he have done that day differently? You know, he served actually pretty well. Sinner played lights out tennis in fairly past conditions. It was pretty warm that afternoon. He looked completely helpless. And that's sort of, listen, I've never been in that situation, so I can't speak for it. But I think, you know, there has to be an element of the pressure piling on him without getting these victories against these guys. And the defeats are becoming more and more bruising. It's not like he's close on Saturday. It wasn't like he was close. He wasn't. And he has tried to change things in his game, but Sinner didn't allow him to play his game. He didn't allow him time on the ball. And you could just sense how much confidence there was in Sinner. The moment he got the first break, he knew he'd beaten this guy multiple occasions over the last few weeks, and he was able to play pretty free-flowing tennis.
Yeah, the Miami match, I know, was a different surface, but Zverev played it as well as he could have in that second half and still lost the second set and still lost the set. So it's a tough one there for sure. We'll see if Zverev goes to the drawing board. But yeah, number 3 having these issues against the top 2 players says a lot about the gap we mentioned. The other story, you know, the final story in Monte Carlo was Valentin Vacherot, right? He makes the semifinals, the local from Monaco, into the top 20 now, and had a ton of crowd support and a very exciting style of play. So it's not just the story, Nick, of Vacherot's run at Monte Carlo. It's this journey in less than a year, pretty much 6-7 months, that he's gone from outside the top 200 to now a bona fide top 20 player.
I mean, I think he has the 4th best winning percentage at Masters 1000s of any active player right now. That gives you an idea of just how quickly and how successful he's been. And I know it's it's a smaller sample size, but he's right up there in the mix, isn't he? Incredible week last week, how tough he was physically. In some difficult situations, playing late at night. It was cold there in the evenings. He was virtually on 4th match every night, 2.5 hours each evening. The win against Musetti was real quality. Musetti didn't play particularly well. He looked rusty, but that got him going into the event. And then, of course, those wins over Hurkacz in, again, very difficult conditions. I just thought physically, you know, and I think you have to look back at this. I was thinking about this too. When he won Shanghai, that was perhaps the most demanding conditions of any event last year.
Yeah,
It was 100
they were
degrees
dropping
Celsius.
like flies.
Yes, it was 100 degrees Celsius in Fahrenheit, sorry, in Shanghai with 90% humidity. And he was the last guy standing, and he came through qualies, and he came through a set down in the majority of the matches. So I think that's a real indicator just how physically fit this guy is and how strong he is to come through those situations. And I think we saw it again last week. And, you know, it obviously meant a lot, a club he'd grown up at. But he's won a lot of matches, a lot of competitive matches, and looks very comfortable at this level very quickly, considering where he was, as you say, last year when he was not floundering, but he was outside the top 200 for a while. And again, I do think you need a bit of perspective. You know, a couple of years ago, he was pretty close to cracking the top 100. There were some injuries that got in the way. And maybe those extra years of development have certainly served him well because he looks, you know, very, very good out there.
He is no stranger to a battle. He is willing to go the distance, and if it gets tough, he's willing to put it all on the line. So we'll see where it goes, but no flash in the pan so far. This is way more than 15 minutes of fame. He's keeping it going. So props to Valentin Vacherot. Also want to give props to the winner of the women's event in Linz last week. It was Mirra Andreeva being Anastasia Potapova in the final. It was 3 sets. Andreeva lost the first set, wins the last 2 in the all-Russian encounter, Nick. But, I know it's a smaller tournament, but I think for someone like Andreeva, who we've seen, it's been through a lot. It's been some ups and downs with her psyche. Anytime you win, it's a good thing, especially when you kind of need it, right? And I think she needed that win, and it could bode well for her in the clay season.
Absolutely. Again, not going to say I saw too much of it, but a big springboard, I think, for Andreeva. I think you can sort of plot her, well, downfall's the wrong word, but her U-turn in form to that French Open, that semi-final against Loïc Boisson, that quarterfinal, I think it was, wasn't it? Excuse me. And there was so much going on that day, wasn't there? And I'm not saying she didn't recover from that. Of course, sure she has, but the form has not been the same since, has it, really? It's been a struggle, pressure, obviously. She's still extremely young. We must not forget that. And hopefully this week in Linz, back on a clay court where she's played pretty well in the past, will just act as something of a platform for her to grow her game, because, everyone within tennis circles would, I think, certainly in the know, would tell you that she is a major winner in the waiting. And I think maybe this last 6-9 months maybe has done her a favor, just in terms of getting that feeling of losing and making her more hungry, hopefully, to go on to do good things over the next few months.
Yeah, it was tough, those scenes at Roland Garros against Boisson last year. And I like to see her in a good place because she is a very good player, great personality. And, we're doing it again. You mentioned it, right? Like, we always kind of forget how young some of these players are. And unfortunately, when somebody as young or younger comes up, she's got a couple contemporaries, the Mbokos, the Jovic's, we kind of forget how young and how talented she is now. So I want to see all these players kind of challenge each other. And I think it's good to have her back in the mix, to a top 10 player, major semifinalist. It's always a great thing to have.
Yeah, and hopefully the younger, as you said, the younger players can spur her on a little bit. And you know what? Because she's not the only teen in town here.
No.
You'd hope that actually might provide something of a little bit of a challenge, and she will hopefully rise to it, because the game's there, isn't there? I think the game's there. I don't think that's any doubt. And it's just a case of putting the pieces together.
Well, turning the attention to this week, and there's a couple tournaments. We got a couple 500s. We've got a big event in the women's side in Stuttgart, and we've got just a lot of action. But you're calling the Barcelona action, which has, Alcaraz, as we mentioned, had some interesting matches today. And one of them I wanted to talk about, because you called his match in Marrakech, but Jodar wins, and he wins dominantly over Munar. And the rise of this kid, Nick, has been something to see. He was a college tennis player at Virginia not too long ago. Wasn't even the top singles player. In the span of a year, he's gone from, oh, okay, this kid has potential, to now everyone's on the watch list for this guy, really challenging, rising up the ranks. How have you seen his play, not just today, but in that title run in Marrakech? What does Jodar do special, and why is he here to stay?
Fearless. I love the way he transitions from different parts of the court. He's not afraid to come forwards. Like the majority of very good modern day players, he can hurt you off both wings. The backhand is just as potent as the forehand. I love the way, even this evening against Munar, who, let's be honest, has come back from injury, so a little bit of struggle, a couple of months out. But he made Munar at 35 in the world look like he was just a beginner. And it was an incredible level this evening in, again, heavy conditions, and generally in slower in the evening. You need guys that can hit through the court. And my goodness, can he hit through the court? His forehand is not just got a lot of spin attached to it. It's got an incredible amount of pace. He completely took apart Munar's second serve today. And yes, Munar's second serve, maybe not the most fearsome of weapons, but just the way he was attacking the ball. He kept Munar so deep in the court because of how heavy and how hard he hits the ball. And as I say, I think the one thing I love about him, and we've seen youngsters in the past, they hit big and they kind of wait and they stay on the baseline and they don't look for the opportunities. He looks for the opportunities. His north-south movement, as I like to call it, is exceptional. He loves to make that transition forwards and look for the opportunities. I love his game. It'll be very interesting this week because the tests are going to get more stern. He's going to play people that are going to be able to maybe just hurt him a little bit more off the serve. He's not necessarily played a big server yet, I don't think, in this run, and that's going to be interesting because, when they're able to just hurt him a bit more, that'll get them on ahead in the point much more. So Yeah, I think possibly Hachanov maybe next. I think it is, or Carabelli, again, depending on results. But he looks, everything I hear again on the sidelines about him is he has an incredible powers of concentration, extremely humble young man. At college, the college coaches talked extensively about what a pleasure he was to have around.
Yeah.
No, he wasn't out there first year at college. He wasn't out there partying. He was out there with a focus to win tennis matches for his college. And I think in the back of his mind, he knew as well that this was the path he was going to take. I actually heard the other day that they were a little bit fearful, Virginia, that he was going to, because he signed as Fonseca did. Let's not forget Fonseca had signed for Virginia and then didn't go. And they were
Yeah.
quite concerned that the same was going to happen with Jodar because he went to play Davis Cup for Spain as a hitting partner in September. And I think the college, I understand, were quite worried he wasn't going to go. Anyway, he committed, went for a year, used that experience,
Yeah.
and has really kicked on. And listen, I'm looking forward to seeing him play one of the big guys because that is going to be
Yeah.
very interesting.
Fonseca was all set to go to Virginia, and then he played that golden swing that one year, and then that was pretty much it. So they gotta be careful there. But no, Hodar's here. I love to see him in the mix. And unfortunately, bad news as you mentioned earlier too. Jack Draper retiring early with, I believe, a knee injury. I didn't hear anything. Correct me if I'm wrong. Too serious. Hopefully, not like a catastrophic injury, but tough to see Draper battling injuries, whatever body part it is, given that we know right how high the level is when he's out there against the very best, but is kind of snake bitten right now.
Yeah, I just hope from him the mental toll. He's okay because I think Jack will be the first to admit it's been extremely tough over the last year or so to sit on the sidelines and watch these guys play. Listen, again, I've never been in that position, so I don't know. But everything I know about Jack is that I just hope he can stay positive, stay optimistic, and hope this is okay. He certainly didn't look great today. I didn't play the. Again, I understand he was fine coming in. The reason he didn't play Monte Carlo was not because he was injured. He was fine. They were never going to play Monte Carlo. That was never on the agenda. It was always about coming to Barcelona first. So that was never the plan. So yeah, let's just hope that it's okay. He's got a lot of points to defend in Madrid as well, but it's not really even that, is it? I think he's not looking necessarily at points at the moment. His ranking's going to drop anyway. It's more about building momentum. It's more about getting
Yeah.
some matches in under his belt, getting a series of tournaments, and it not being just this stop-start nature. And I hope that I hope for him because he's such a good competitor and he's so hungry for success. Jack, he's a guy who doesn't cut any corners at all. He's such a great pro, and I hope he can remain upbeat, and I hope you see him back soon.
Yeah, wish him the best. We know Madrid was where he made the final last year, but it's just about playing healthy, getting matches, and getting back in form. So wish him the best. The other match you called today, Nick, that I got a chance to watch a great deal of was Cam Norrie versus Stan. Stan's last appearance in Barcelona. 3-set win for Cam Norrie. Brutal ending on that wet cord, but hey, sometimes the tennis gods work in mysterious ways. But competitive, good win for Norrie. Unfortunately, it's the end of the road for Stan, but he had a nice moment with Tommy Robredo, tournament director, former foe on the court, and another in a set of goodbyes for Stan on tour. But it was a high quality match yet again.
Yeah, I felt a bit for Stan actually because you could see that defeat hurt, as it should do, right? That's why he's still out there at 41, and then he suddenly has to be sort of thrown into a ceremony, which is great, and obviously it's a mark of his career and the respect he's held in. But you could sort of sense he didn't really want to go through that again. It was, of course, I'm sure fully appreciates it, but the nature of that defeat, I think, hurt. He's out there to win matches. He said that all along, right? This is not he's not on a farewell tour. Though. He's not going around the tour to say goodbye to everybody. He's going around to win tennis matches. That's what he wants to do. And maybe towards the latter part of the year, that might change. But I felt for him today a little bit. I thought he was the better player for periods of that match. Yes, I know Cam surfed in the second. But we saw Wawrinka's quality. Cam got tight a little bit. He definitely got a little nervous, which he can do. But ultimately, maybe a little fortunate. Ultimately, it was an away day, wasn't it? The crowd were very much on Wawrinka's side. And you know what? At 41 years of age, to still be competing, we talk about Cam's physicality. He's a guy who very rarely gets tired. And Wawrinka's taken him for 2.5 hours this evening at 41 years of age and very nearly got the better of him. And I think, we have to respect that.
a tough spot to be in. Yeah, being honored immediately after a tough loss, but Stan handles it with class. We'll follow his retirement tour the rest of the way. A couple more things with Nick Lester here on the Inside in Tennis podcast, talking to the veteran ATP commentator and tennis commentator about all the storylines as clay season ramps up. Barcelona has some great matches coming up, and one of them that stood out to me was Musetti coming back from injury, taking on Martin Landaluce tomorrow. So that's one. I mean, there's a few others, and the draw is very exceptional for 500. But yeah, Musetti Landaluce is one I'm going to be watching intently.
Yeah, second week in a row he's played a home player as well, right? Because Vacherot last week in Monaco was a little uncomfortable for him. He didn't play well. I think, listen, I don't know. Reading between the lines, I think they sort of missed Miami to get ready for the clay. They knew it was an important time of year for him. A lot of points to defend, potential for him to grow his game and challenge at some of the biggest events of the year, and that didn't work out last week. He looked to be rusty last week to me. He looked to be not sure of himself in the big moments, and I think that was. Tomorrow, and this match with Landaluce is an awkward start, a very, very awkward start. Playing conditions are going to be pretty warm, I think, on Tuesday. That's going to help Landaluce, who's flying full of confidence. He's been hitting with Alcaraz as well. Landaluce was in Murcia a couple of weeks ago. He was a challenger last week as well. So he's in good form, a lot of tennis, and a very, very awkward start from Musetti. So would not be surprised if this went to 3 and potentially Musetti under a bit of pressure. But Musetti needs that tomorrow. He needs a win. It's a time of year where he plays very well on the clay. This is his time of year. So let's hope he can, from his perspective, he can find a way to just tighten things up a little bit.
Landaluce getting better and better, and wow, that's hitting with Alcaraz. That's going to help him too. So that's an exceptional one to watch. There's also, there's also the tournament in Munich. We saw Ben Shelton survived 3 sets with Emilio Nava, the American there. Zverev's there. He's done well a lot in the tournament's history. Bublik, Fonseca, another one playing another event. So some big names over there. And what I've also noticed too, Nick, is that this one, the weather can go a little haywire. Every time I watch Munich, I don't know if it's going to be sunny or 40 degrees and hail.
Yeah, Northern Europe in that time of year, still very changeable, right? Much heavier in Munich. That's amazing, isn't it, when you think Zverev has now not won a title in a year. Munich last year was the last title Zverev won. So it's a full circle moment for him. Probably the favorite to win there. You'd probably have him over Shelton still at home on clay. Fonseca in the mix. So yeah, good tournament. As I say, heavy conditions, pretty decent field. I think obviously probably the majority of players would rather go to Barcelona just because one, you can guarantee the weather. It's slightly probably better event on the outside in some of the conditions there. Going into Madrid as well, same country. So that's probably when Barcelona has got a slightly stronger field, I think. And of course, you've got the 2 young Spaniards. But yeah, I think Zverev will want to win this week just to reestablish himself and just make sure that those titles keep coming in.
The WTA, which I mentioned, really hits their clay season now with Stuttgart, which is just an elite field, small draw. I mean, we don't have Sabalenka or Rybakina, which we can get to, but that field's so tiny. And the fact, too, that it's kind of indoor, you have different conditions. You're really, the men play on different clay-type surfaces. The women might trump them with just how different their run-up is. But yeah, Nick, no Sabalenka, no Rybakina announced that she pulled out. So an interesting spot, right? They've been the 2 best players, but they're both going to be absent, maybe preventative, just resting up for bigger things. But the opportunity exists then for the rest of the field.
Yeah, I think it kind of circles back to what we were saying, right? These 12-day Masters are a bit of an endurance test these days. And if you've had a number of matches, you've had a lot of matches, you don't necessarily need to load in another event, and something's got to give. Stuttgart, as you say, is a bit of an outlier indoors, much faster conditions. You look at some of the winners there over the years. Some of the winners there have not necessarily been your traditional clay court players, slightly, favoring slightly bigger servers. So, yeah, good field. I think Coco's playing, isn't she? I believe. So it'll be interesting to see if she goes. Obviously, having seemed to pick up some nice form in Miami and played pretty well there for the most part. So she'll be looking to build. Got that defensive Roland Garros to think about. So a long stretch for her. You'd have to imagine that she probably won't go back to the States now until after Roland Garros. So that's a good 7-week, 8-week trip on the road for Coco, long stretch, like it is for a lot of Americans right this time of year. You kind of you pack those bags, and for the most part, they don't go back until maybe post Roland Garros for a short period.
Yeah, Coco gaining confidence. I think her game can match up very well for Stuttgart. I also think, I mean, the biggest thing with Sabalenka and Rybakina out, even if they were in, was our first look at Iga post-coaching change. So what
Yeah.
that looks like kind of going into just seeing what kind of confidence she has. And like we were talking about certain players, right? And it's not about winning the tournament. It's about gaining confidence going into the slam season, which she prioritizes. So that's what I'm the most curious about, how Iga looks this tournament.
Yeah, and I think mentally as well, as much as anything, emotionally, I think we've seen her struggle this year, haven't we? There's definitely been some matches there. I'm thinking of the one in Australia. Never really, I didn't think, got a grip of her tennis in Melbourne. Personally, I did quite a few matches over there. She didn't look as though she was playing that well throughout the course of that event, kind of struggling with the rhythm. And she's talked a lot about wanting to get back to what she does well in terms of the discipline. And you know what? If you can't take inspiration from a week or so with Rafa, I'm not sure you can take inspiration from her anywhere. She's someone she grew up listening to, idolizing. You get the feeling that is going to be a very, very good reset for her. Just to get out, spending time there, picking his brain, discussing the challenges ahead. She's got the pedigree. We know that. It's probably finding ways to neutralize some of the players that have got the better of her. We know there's a bit of a training with those big servers over the years, those big hitters that have been how to just rush her a little bit more. But I think once she builds confidence back in her game, this is her time of year, right? This has been the time she's taken ownership of the tour. And maybe that extra little bit of time to reset, hopefully will do us some good.
Yeah, the thing that people forget or maybe overlook when it goes bad with not just Iga, but other players, right, Nick? It can snowball. That's just the nature of the beast, nature of sports. But Iga, when it goes well, she wins a lot and she racks up
Absolutely.
wins and tournaments. And I think if she gets that back, we might need to look out, especially given if some of the top contenders are off or not playing. So exciting stuff. Nick Lester, this is always a blast. Always learn from your insights into the game. I know the audience appreciates it. Anything else coming up for you we should know about, or just catch you on the
Just
airwaves
a lot of
nonstop?
weeks ahead. A lot of weeks ahead, Mitch. I'll be doing Rome after this. I've got a little break Rome, and then I'll be on site at Roland Garros for a couple of weeks doing the world feed. So really looking forward to being in Paris, and then then I'll be coming over. Yeah, just lots of good tennis ahead, Mitch. I love this time of year. It's so intense, right? The clay court season to me is the best time of year. I love the clay court season. I think it's the best tennis. Not everyone would agree with me, but I think it paints the best pictures. It requires just a little bit more tactical nous, in my opinion, on
Yeah.
clay. There's a little more variety, a little more thought involved in the tennis, and I just think it's the point construction, if that's for
Mhm.
want of a better word, and the way the points play out to me is just a more enjoyable brand of tennis. But that's only my opinion.
Yeah, well, maybe one day we'll have a full debate style where you'll defend clay and we'll have a grass or a hard court guy, and we can
Exactly.
just all. But until then, it's always a pleasure, Nick Lester. Nick Lester, thanks for coming on the podcast. Always appreciate you joining the Inside in Tennis podcast. All the best going forward.
Thanks, Mitch.
That was Nick Lester. This was the Inside in Tennis podcast. Reminder, we're on all your podcast platforms, whether it's Apple, Spotify, iHeart, or Amazon Music. You can find the podcast by searching Inside in Tennis podcast and subscribing so every episode's automatically downloaded. And if you're so kind, leave a nice rating and a review. I would really appreciate that as well. Video episodes are available on the YouTube channel at Mitch Michals. Back again in a couple days, so you're not going to want to miss that. For Nick Lester, I'm Mitch Michals. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Inside in Tennis podcast. I'll talk to you soon.